Our next speaker came all the way from Melbourne just to be with you here tonight and tell his story. Please welcome Claudio Paganini.
My first paper, after 1 year of tedious work, my first paper is almost finished. Finally, some outcome, some progress. My first original contribution. We have the paper sitting around for almost a month, adding finishing touches here and there, when 1 week before we want to submit it, suddenly 2 other guys upload a paper with the same result. We got scooped on my first paper. It feels like a kick to the balls. Well, heads up, damage control, emails go forth and back. We realize that after all, they use a completely different technique. So we agree, due to the proximity and time, that we cite each other, and well, so eventually we get both our papers published. Whew. So after all good. And on top of it, Felix, one of the professors on the other paper, invited us to Regensburg to visit his group. Fast forward, a warm early summer day in June 2017. We just had a lively conversation over lunch, and we decided to continue it over a coffee. So we're heading over to this coffee place, and it's quite small, but it has some of this shiny aluminum furniture sitting outside that you tend to find in those places. So the sun is shining, almost a little bit too hot, to be honest, but we decide to sit outside, have a coffee, and continue our conversation about math, physics, and academic politics. Now, for you to understand the conversation that was to unfold between me and Felix, I need to give you a little bit on the history of fundamental physics. Fundamental physics... I make it short, I promise. Fundamental physics today basically consists of 2 theories. Let's call them the beauty and the beast. First came Einstein in 1915 with his theory of general relativity, the beauty. It's slick, elegant, one short equation describing gravitation. Then, in the 50s, 60s, and 70s, the standard model of particle physics emerged, the beast. It is a mess with an equation almost 1 page long, and it describes everything else, matter, radiation, and all the particles we observe. Now, the holy grail of physics is to marry the 2. That means to find a unifying theory. The problem? They are fundamentally incompatible. Now, there have been various ideas around that try to solve this problem. You can think of them as basically being different priests that try to make the marriage happen. But today, none of these theories can be tested, and so which approach people prefer becomes essentially a matter of belief. So the scientific community kind of splits into sects, and the most prominent of these ideas is string theory. So now back to this lovely day on the not so lovely 60s style concrete campus in Regensburg. I start the conversation. So we really had a hard time getting our paper published. Our reviewer was more into into political bullshit than into the content of our paper. It was so ridiculous, but not even appeal to the editor helped. Yeah, in particular, they didn't like our reference to your paper. How did the publication process work for you? Felix replies, well, I know, there's this group in our field that just doesn't like our approach. So we just looked for a journal where we submitted it, where we could avoid them as referees. And actually, for us, it went quite smooth and we got helpful and constructive feedback from the referee. That sounds a lot better than our experience. Yeah, some groups just put political power above anything else. It's really annoying. Basically, if you run for a job against one of them, your work essentially doesn't matter. Felix, well, I'm glad I don't have to worry about this anymore. This puts me on the roll for one of the topics I hate the most in the academic world. Yeah, it's just really a pity that people put power above the scientific ideal. But basically the only field that's probably worse than ours is fundamental physics. I mean, string theory is really just, in the US, it's basically more a religious cult than a branch of scientific research. I mean, the results they have just doesn't match up the claims. It almost borders on intellectual dishonesty what they do as a scientific community. Now, especially, the results they have don't justify the dominant position string theory has. They just use their political power to make sure that all the jobs stay within their camp. I end my rant with my usual sentence. I mean, after all, string theory is much more a theory of anything rather than a theory of everything. We just don't have one well-founded theory yet. To which Felix replies, well, one idea exists. I've been working on something, on a theory, for the past 10-15 years. Wait, what? Let's put the gravity of the situation into context. So for more than past 30 years, some of the most brilliant minds have been trying their luck with this problem, and all of them failed. And now there's this guy sitting across the table from me, not at Harvard or Stanford, but in freaking Regensburg, leaning back in the sun, enjoying his coffee, casually telling me that he solved the problem, that he has the holy grail of physics. Let that sink in for a minute. Now, add in the fact that I had never heard of this theory before. Felix seems to read my mind on that, and with a little sadness in his voice, he adds, well, people just don't take it serious. And I've just been doing my thing, and I stopped really advertising it. At that point in time, I probably have the expression on my face as if I've just encountered an alien. Felix continues calmly, well, if you're interested, I can give you an introduction tomorrow afternoon. You can bet hell I was interested. But of course, also very skeptical, given the magnitude of the claims. So the next afternoon, Felix gives us a crash course into his theory. I'm like a kid in a ball pit. Despite all the skepticism and the fact that I can only vaguely follow his explanation, I get this gut feeling that he might be truly onto something. That night, I didn't sleep much. My physical intuition kicked in, and I had ideas spinning in my head all night long. Next morning, I told Felix about my ideas. When it's time to leave in the afternoon, he sends me off with a, hey, I've been thinking about your ideas, and they might actually work. You're soon done with your PhD, right? Why don't we write a project together, and you can come here to do a postdoc. All right? I go back to Berlin. I meet my girlfriend. I don't quite remember that conversation, but it must have been something along the way. Hey, Jesse, you don't believe what I came across in Regensburg. There is this guy there who claims that he has the holy grail of physics, and there is a chance to do a super risky project with him. To which she replied with a skeptical look on her face, uh-huh, sounds about like you. The math of the theory is extremely complex, so it will take months, if not years, to tell apart fact from fiction. But I have mere weeks to decide to make a decision which will impact my future academic career. So I do what you always do in this situation. I ask for people for their opinion on the theory and the project. The reaction usually went like that. Are you fucking crazy? You throw away your scientific career if you do that. I look at them, but why? What is wrong with the theory? Well, I don't know. I don't really understand it, but I haven't heard from anybody that it is any good. And this project will pay you 18 months, 36 months, and then who will hire you? Basically, if you want to pursue alternative ideas, you need really quick success. This is just a huge gamble between the scientific breakthrough and failure. If you succeed, sure, you'll be catapulted to the levels of Newton, Einstein, Schrödinger. But if you fail, you'll end among the Croters and Figetes of this world. Why don't you just apply for a more conservative project? At least the chance of getting hired afterwards will be much better. Of course, the recognition won't be quite that much. Well, so the scientific community wasn't really any help on judging this new theory. So everything I was left with to evaluate this new approach was my own judgment. And that is where non-academic considerations come into play. See, point is, having a relationship while in academia is generally tricky. You live on short-term contracts, and when they're over, you have to move somewhere on the world where you get your next job. Now make this double with both being in academia, and the problem essentially becomes unsolvable. So Jessie is also doing her PhD in Berlin, and she is supposed to finish soon after me. Opposed to me, she actually already has some strong postdoc offers in Vienna and some in Zurich. Now Regensburg is pretty much spot on between those three cities where she has the most likelihood to live. So this is a rare opportunity where my potential workplace will be compatible somewhat at least with any of her options. Adding the fact that she's a much better scientist than I am, so it is pretty clear that if we don't find jobs within reasonable distance, it will be on me to leave academia. Now, so the point is, with that in mind, the all or nothing aspect of the project in Regensburg is really not that bad. So based on that, I decide to go for it and push ahead with the application. Then the blow. Just 4 weeks before the deadline for the application, I'm coming home from a conference just to find Jessie at my place with all my things. It's over. I'm devastated. It feels like all meaning and purpose has left my life, like the air escaping a balloon that slipped out of my hand. As always, bad comes to worst, and all my other research projects have hit a roadblock at about the same time. This toxic mix puts me into kamikaze mode. Fuck everything, I don't care anymore, I'm going all in. Now that attitude kinda at least gets the application done in time, despite the fact that I only sleep like 3 hours a night. And so application is off. Fast forward last November, out of the blue more or less, I received a job offer for an 18-month postdoc in Melbourne. 2 days later, I get the approval for the 18-month postdoc position in Regensburg. So now I actually have to make the choice. Do I try for the scientific breakthrough here in Europe, or do I go to the other side of the world for a more conservative approach? While weighing the different options, I wrote the following poem. Too good to be true. If you have an idea and you think it's the hit, I have to warn you, it's most likely just shit. If you have an idea and you think it's the best, you should not get excited and make sure that you hide it before you have put it to a rigorous test. Because what's often the case in this intellectual maze, that you fall for an illusion. To avoid this frustration and deep disappointment, keep down the excitement. So, to always be fine, just remember this line. If something's too good to be true, it's most likely just poo. So, with this attitude, So with this sentiment towards daring ideas and the safety and stability of the relationship gone, I have to mitigate the risk for my scientific career, and I choose the safer option. And that's how I end up in Melbourne. Now, looking back, I have to say it was certainly the smarter decision to make, but to be honest, I don't think that the conservative approach is really my thing. I just find it hard to motivate myself, to put in the necessary grind, to push a project to completion when I'm working on a normal project. The crazy ones, however, get me flying. And so it's likely that my next destination is going to be Regensburg after all.